Welcome to the Brain Tap Podcast, here to help you relax, reboot, and strengthen your overworked brain. Your host, Dr. Patrick Porter, is the developer of the Brain Tap Pro mobile app, designed to help you sleep better, lose weight, de-stress, or kick a bad habit, all while increasing energy, focus, peak performance, and more. Take the free Brain Tap Pro Challenge. Simply register at braintap.pro. That's braintap.pro. On the Brain Tap Podcast, Dr. Porter brings together a team of experts to share up-to-the-minute news in neuroscience, brain training technology, along with how mindfulness and meditation can be used to improve your life in ways you never imagined possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Patrick Porter.
Hello and welcome back. This is Dr. Patrick Porter and welcome back to Brain Tap Radio. Today I have a very special guest. I was very fortunate to spend some time with him in Las Vegas with his team, and we were working together, and I was so impressed with what I learned. It was incredible to be able to go out to dinner and have like a private training class about the brain and how it works. And who I'm talking about today is Dr. Russ Kort, who graduated in 1999 from Palmer College of Chiropractic in Davenport, Iowa. He's a board eligible diplomat of the American Board of Chiropractic Neurologists. So he's, I would say, overeducated, but that's all right. You know, we need those kind of people. He loves to learn, and he has a great way of sharing that information. So Dr. Kort, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Porter. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm excited for you to share some of the things we talked about. I mean, you have so many stories. Like I was saying, we could syndicate your stories and probably do a podcast every week just doing those because of all the people you're helping. I think one of the things that I thought was very incredible about what you do is you set up shop above an ice skating rink. I mean, if there's any sport that causes concussions to happen, I think falling on the ice. I mean, most people, growing up in Michigan, that's what you see a lot is people falling on the ice, getting concussions. So you're right there helping people. So tell us a little bit about what got you into the field of chiropractic and why you expanded it, because most chiropractors are pretty happy just doing the normal everyday, what they call the Miracle 7, the hit them high, hit them low, hit them in the middle, let them go. And you're not that kind of person at all. When I saw you working, in fact, I thought, is he really doing chiropractic? Because it was so much different. So tell me a little bit about what you're about and what brought you to the point you're at right now.
Well, I was really fortunate, actually. I grew up outside of Aspen, Colorado, in a little town called Glenwood Springs. And I started ski racing at the age of 7, and I entered a ski race that I wasn't supposed to be in and had a pretty bad crash, injured my neck and injured my brain. But I didn't know I injured my brain because back in 72, we didn't really know what concussions were. And I went to the chiropractor, and he cracked my neck, hit me high, hit me low, took the money and let me go. And I thought, that's cool. You get paid to do that? That's awesome. And so I had chiropractic care throughout my life, but I didn't really, I was never treated for the concussion. And shortly, probably a couple months, 2-3 months after my concussion that was not diagnosed, I had some significant problems with school and with my learning. And I was tested, and they said, oh, you know what, you're not, we made a mistake. You're not actually gifted. You're learning disabled, meaning that you can't learn anymore. And we're going to put you from 2nd grade into 1st grade. And we think that you have a Ritalin deficiency. So we're going to put you on Ritalin. And we're also going to put you in special ed. And so I thought, oh my goodness, you know what? I've become retarded, and I'm, wrong. I've become learning disabled, and I'm on drugs, and I can't learn. And it was really horrible. And at that point, as a 7-year-old, you make these decisions. And so mine was take my life and make it look like an accident. So I became a ski racer. I was a pretty decent ski racer. I had no fear of dying. And in the course of that, I managed to break most of the bones in my body from, a broken pelvis at 12, four broken vertebrae in my back, broke my back in 4 places at 14 in a downhill where I landed on my head at 65 miles an hour, and then broke my neck at 18 and spent 8 months in rehab. But I think that God had a bigger purpose for me, and that was to do what we're doing now. So I spent a lot of time in ambulances. I spent the first part of my career working on an ambulance on a paramedic unit. When I graduated from high school, I held 5 jobs, and working in the hospital, working on the ambulance. I had keys to the ambulance the day I turned 18. And, you know, it's kind of ironic that I grew up thinking that I couldn't, and yet I did. So that's how that came about. I just gotten a job, my dream job, on the Denver Fire Department, when I was in a pretty horrible rollover and injured myself pretty seriously and needed to come up with plan B. So the rollover was in Nebraska. Iowa was pretty close to that. So I just went down the road and started chiropractic school. That's how I got involved. Pardon me?
It was the same cornfield. I mean, you were in Nebraska. You're there.
It was the same cornfield. And ironically, I just thought of this. Ironically, I pulled into Davenport, Iowa. I was in my motorhome. I had my Jeep behind me. And I stopped at this restaurant called the Machine Shed. And I was in an ice storm. I'd never been in an ice storm. And I got out of the vehicle. My legs went above my head. And I slammed my head on the pavement and gave myself another concussion. So I actually started chiropractic school with a concussion. Crazy, crazy. I didn't think of that until we were talking.
Right. Well, incredible. Well, tell me a little bit about you. You went through chiropractic school. You obviously have your degree. And then what caused you to go back to school and learn more? I mean, that most people are satisfied once they get their doctorate.
Well, you know, I went through chiropractic school, and I had a lot of adversity because I was having trouble learning as a result of brain injuries, and I was exposed to Atlas orthogonal early on in my, well, actually it was about halfway through school, and I got exposed to Atlas orthogonal. I actually had a NUCA adjustment, and then I learned about Atlas orthogonal, and we use a sound wave to move the Atlas. That was a pivotal point for me because it really changed how I looked at chiropractic, and I just wanted to continue to learn more. Well, I graduated in '99, and I practiced until 2010 when I met Dr. Ted Carrick. And I met Dr. Carrick at the Oregon Chiropractic Convention, and I watched him wake a lady up out of a coma. And I just realized, I don't know as much as I think I know. And so I decided at that point I was going to devote my life to learning more about neurology, learning more about functional neurology, and taking it from the spine up to the brain. And so I've devoted my life from 2010 to today, 2018, to learning as much as I can about the brain. And about 3 years ago, had an epiphany that really changed the direction of how I work with the brain and with the body through chiropractic.
What was that epiphany? What happened? What was the trigger? You're leaving us on the edge there.
I kind of led you into that, didn't I? So I was doing one of those chiropractic things where you go to the YMCA and you try and get patients. And I met this boy named Sam, and Sam changed my life. Sam actually has what's called optic nerve hypoplasia. So he has small optic nerves. And I'd never seen this kind of a case before, but Sam is high on the autistic spectrum. And because he has small optic nerves, he has a really hard time focusing. So his head moves side to side a lot like Stevie Wonder. And, you know, he's just constantly moving his head and his balance is off. And we talked at the Y, and then a few weeks later, his mom brought him into my clinic and said, "Hey, what do you think you could do with him?" And I thought, oh my goodness, I have no idea. Let's start with, can he crawl? And so he and I crawled on the floor. I have pictures of he and I crawling on the floor to see if he crawled normally. And then I wanted to see if he walked normally with a normal hand swing. And that's frontal lobe. That's the front of the brain. And so I needed to see, was that intact? And it was. So I checked that off my list, and I'm thinking, okay, I've got crawling down. I've got some walking that's pretty good. And I'm checking his hearing, and he's conversing with me. And then all of a sudden, Dr. Porter, he starts screaming, "No," at the top of his lungs. I mean, no, no, no. No reason. He just starts screaming. And I'm thinking, I have about 12 seconds before my office empties from the front and comes to the back to find out why a boy is screaming in my office.
Mhm.
I had to come up with a plan. So I took a tuning fork out of my table and I whacked it on the floor and stuck it on his left big toe because I wanted to get into his right brain and stop the screaming.
Mhm.
And to my surprise, this boy leaned back and went, "Oh, yeah." And he just started laughing. And so I knew that I could use vibration to affect his brain. And then I went in search of finding a bigger vibration device. And there's many different kinds of vibration devices out there, and they're all different prices, but most of them are mechanical and they bounce and they shake and they're pretty violent. As I said in the beginning of the interview, I've broken most of the bones in my body and I've had 3 back surgeries. And so standing on something that's really violent just didn't work for me. And I knew it wouldn't work for Sam. And so I was calling around, and I remembered that a friend of mine, actually a tutor that I had way back in undergrad, named Jonette Biebensheimer, she had a device that she told me about that vibrated. And so I called her. I said, "Hey, I'm looking for a giant tuning fork." And she said, "That's what I have." And so she brought it to my clinic, and the rest is kind of a really interesting history of how over the last 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years, I've been working with all kinds of different cases to affect the brain through sound vibration, through the feet and through the hands.
From there, what are you finding is happening? Because I saw, this was one of the things I saw when we were in Vegas. I had one of our clients actually came by and helped us at the booth, and you were working with him, and it really blew me away the way you were able to, with our data pulse analysis, we're able to do the analysis of what's happening with his nervous system, and you were able to create quite an effect on him in just a couple of days. But you were doing things a little bit differently. So can you explain, how did you come up with the technology? And for those that are listening or watching the video here, explain what you did, because you were only working like on one side of his body instead of working on his whole body, which seems natural to me, but I'm not a neurological chiropractor. So tell me a little bit about what was happening there.
Oh, it's a great question. And it is advanced chiropractic. After I started working with Dr. Carrick and started understanding neurology, I started changing from adjusting on both sides of the body to adjusting one side of the body so that I could affect the other side of the brain. And with this guy that you're speaking about, he had a lot going on with him. I mean, he had diabetes. He was missing 4 toes on one foot. He had huge balance problems. And so we started him out on a pretty high frequency of vibration, but not a lot of intensity. And I had him standing on this with both feet, and it made him not as good. I won't say worse, because I hate that word, but he certainly wasn't as good as he was when I started. And so I had to come up with plan B. And I think that's what makes me the kind of doctor I am, is I always have plan B and C and D if things are not working. And so what we did is I looked at his tongue deviation to see which way his tongue was deviating when he stuck it out. And I looked at what was happening with his body. And we settled in on having him stand on his right foot on the vibration, and using his index finger and his middle finger and his thumb on the vibration. And then his left foot I had on a stack of books, because if you remember when we were at the show, I'm like walking around looking for books and whatever I could to stabilize his pelvis. So we just had him standing on his right foot to affect his left brain and his right cerebellum. And we had him stand there, and we were able to have him stand there with his eyes closed, which is really remarkable, because this guy could not stand on both feet with his eyes closed. But when we started working with his nervous system this way, he was able to stand on both feet with his eyes closed and completely comfortable. Do you remember that?
Yes, yeah, that was very impressive.
It was shocking. And I treated him 3 times over the course of 2 days, and we had really, great results in his balance. He came in the next day, he said, boy, I can't believe how much better I'm balancing. I'm walking better. I slept last night. I'm feeling better. My vision's improving. And I know that, you know, as we speak to your audience, they're thinking, seriously? But I did a study early on when I first got the Sonics. That's the name of the vibration device that I use. It's out of South Korea, and my friend Jonette has the rights to sell it all over the world. When I first got the Sonics, I found a couple of frequencies that seemed like they were really good at calming people down. And I did this on myself. And so I actually did a little study, and I can tell you about that if you want to hear more about it, or if you want to continue to talk about that guy, we can talk about the guy that in Vegas.
Let's talk about the study that you did with the Sonics, because that's
okay.
I mean, this is a tool that I was able to get out. I was very impressed with how it resonated through my body and made me feel just by getting on it for I think we did a 10-minute session on it, and it was quite impressive that it seemed gentle, but it was really making things happen.
Well, and what's interesting is that I know in your practice, you use some of these mechanical vibration devices. And so the thing that I'm so grateful about is that you actually got a chance to stand on this sound vibration, and you yourself said it's vastly different. So I did this impromptu research study, and I took 15 people off the street, and I had a huge mean of ages. They were ages 52 to 85. Straight off the street, just said, hey, I want you to come in. I'm going to give you free care for a week, no charge. And so I have a device that I use to measure for concussions from the Cleveland Clinic, and it's a computerized test, and it's pretty good. I didn't have anything else, so I used that. I tested all 15 people, and then I had them stand on the Sonics with their eyes closed at a specific frequency for 10 minutes, 5 days in a row, exactly the same way. And then I retested them. And astonishingly, you know, I measured 14 parameters. And of those 14 parameters, I had 10 of the 14 that had more than a 30% improvement. That's pretty incredible, because I never adjusted anybody. I just had them stand on this for 10 minutes, 5 days in a row. And then I retested them. And we had a 69% improvement in balance. We had a 67% improvement in balance standing on a 2-inch foam pad. We had a 50% improvement in visual acuity, being able to look at numbers while your head's turning to a metronome and the numbers are getting smaller, and letters, and 50% improvement in vision. And I saw that in Sam. Sam actually noticed, you said my office was above an ice rink. Sam couldn't see past the end of the car. And after he'd been on Sonics for a little while, he could actually see the entire length of the building where the Zamboni was dumping snow. And he said to his mom, what's that white stuff down there? And she goes, down there? And he goes, yeah. And she goes, that's the ice from the Zambonis. And he's like, oh, okay. So his vision improved dramatically on the Sonics, and so did these 15 people. We had 100% improvement in bowel movement activity. 100% of people poop more than they normally did. And we had 100% improvement in desire for thirst. We had 100% improvement in sleep. We had, and I mean, everybody said they had those changes. We had a definitive decrease in anxiety. And I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. It's been a while since I did this trial, but it was profound. And I didn't actually do the figures. I sent my figures to the Cleveland Clinic and had the Cleveland Clinic do my figures.
That's
so
great.
it was pretty cool. What other questions do you have for me, Doc?
Well, one thing I know that you really get a lot into what's happening out here with electronic smog and how electronics are actually influencing people. I think there's some miscommunication out there about that and what's happening. And I know that you use the Sonic as well as Brain Tap to do a few of those things. So tell us a little bit about some cases you worked or how you use different technologies in your clinic to help with people, especially when we were talking before, you were talking about how when somebody has a concussion, maybe even early in their life, they don't realize the effect it has on them. They think they've just naturally become a couch potato, but that's kind of what happens because of the trauma that happens, and the electronics might not be helping them that much. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you're exactly right. And I think that the next study that I do is going to be a big published study. We're going to start to collect people on that, because I'm seeing that there's a high correlation between people that have had concussions as children having effects, being hypersensitive to their environment. And so they can be hypersensitive to smells. For instance, you go to the mall and Bed Bath & Beyond knocks them sideways. They can be hypersensitive to sounds or to light. And this is in their 30s and 40s. And they had their concussions as kids like me. And, we're starting to see that in this aging population of baby boomers and even millennials. We're starting to see that they're becoming hypersensitive. And then recently, we've been working, myself and Jonette and some of my other colleagues have been working at looking at this electromagnetic hypersensitivity, mainly because I'm a tactile learner and I'm starting to suffer with it. I'm starting to suffer when I hold my electronics. I hold my phone, it makes my hands sting. I get too close to my laptop, or I hold my laptop next to my body, it makes my body tingle, it makes my tongue go numb. And so I started doing some research into what's happening with this electronic smog, or this EMF smog, and how can we measure it? And so we have been actually working on some ways to come up with ways to measure, literally measure, electromagnetic hypersensitivity. And we've got a couple of ways. We can talk about that later if you want. But I'm seeing this in my patient base. I'm seeing people who are really starting to struggle with everyday life. It started with teachers. And I started seeing teachers that were, actually the way it came out was, we're having more kids because we have more Wi-Fi in the schools. We have most of our kids, at least in the schools where we're at in Sherwood, Oregon, they have Chromebooks or iPads. And then there are those kids like me that are the special kids that have an IEP, or an independent person that hangs out with them. They're starting to struggle more, and they're sensitive to this electronic smog. But we haven't had a way to prove it. And so we're working on that right now. We've got a couple of tests that are going to prove it. And we're just starting to collect the data on that. But these kids, it's almost like bees in their brain, Dr. Porter. They're getting so frustrated. You see them, they're just like rubbing their foreheads and struggling in school. And then I started having these teachers that were coming in that were getting beat up by the kids that were trying to run away from the school. And we started to correlate it, and it's like, oh my goodness, there's this thing with this electronic smog. I don't know if that answered your question. Shall we dig a little deeper?
Yeah, tell me a little bit about how many people do you think this is affecting? Because obviously one of the things most people look for is, hey, do you have Wi-Fi? That's they want to know if you have Wi-Fi so they can stay connected to their digital devices and their screens and what's going on. So what do you think the percentages of people that it's affecting?
Well, this is a whole nother podcast. I think it's affecting all of us. Okay, it's affecting all of us. Now, what we're seeing is that actually this electromagnetic hypersensitivity is a disorder in Europe, and it's actually an ICD-10 disorder. It's also they're finding it a disorder in Africa. Some of the foreign countries have more powerful Wi-Fi signals than we have here in the United States, but I think that's going to change because we're getting ready to switch our phones from 4G to 5G. That's another podcast in itself. I'm seeing symptoms in my clinic of people that are having problems with their electronics and don't know it yet. Mm-hmm. And so, for instance, I see a lot of it with concussion. I see a lot of people that have concussion, and then I take them off of their cell phones, but they can't be without it. They're addicted to their phones, or they're addicted to their electronics, and so they try and utilize their phone and it actually affects their eyes, it affects their hearing, and it's creating a bigger problem. And when they have a concussion, they have certain susceptibilities, and those susceptibilities actually affect the eyes and the ears. That's very common in concussion, that the eyes and the ears are affected. And so what do you do with your cell phone? You take it and you look at it, and you're getting that blue light into your brain through what's called the mesencephalon. That's roasting part of it. And then they stick it up to their head. What's, one of my big beefs with cell phones is that, this is my cell phone, and I don't like to hold it at all, but my cell phone has the same power, whether it's against my head or if it's against my 12-year-old daughter's head. And we're seeing kids that are getting cell phones, as early as 5. That's a babysitter. It's like, here, play a game. And actually getting their own cell phone at 8. Most kids are getting cell phones at 8. And they stick this thing up to their head, and then the radiation from that actually goes 3/4 or all the way through their brain. And that delicate nuclei that I was talking about in the mesencephalon, there's I don't want to get too technical because I know this is going out to a lot of people. But, I believe God put the centers for vision and hearing in the center of the brain to protect them. Because if the center of the brain, if the eyes and the ears go out, you become bait, right? Things will eat you in the world.
Right.
And what I'm seeing is that with concussion, people are sticking their phones up to their heads, and they're having just horrific symptoms from that, as well as their vision. That's in concussed people, because I deal with a lot of those. But then let's look briefly at just regular people. Today, I had a guy come into my office, kind of an interesting case. He spent 6 years in the Navy in a submarine. And then now he works for a computer company. And he came in and he's like, Doc, I know you do brain stuff. I've passed out a few times at work, and nobody can figure out what's going on with me. And I did my exam on him, and I even used some of the technology that you have, and he looks pretty good. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I can't find a lot going on with him. He's got some vision issues where his eyes slip, but his balance is pretty good. And for the most part, he's pretty healthy, but he's always nauseous. 100% of the day, he's nauseous. He feels like he's going to throw up. Well, this guy, you got to look at the environment. You got to look at his environment. What's happened to him in the past? How long has he had a cell phone? How long has he been exposed to electronics? Well, he was in a tin can called a submarine, a nuclear submarine, and he was exposed to radar and all those electronics for 6 years straight. And then now he works for a computer company, and he has 3 giant screens in front of him, and he's always surrounded by massive electronics. So we're going to do an experiment. We're going to take all his electronics away from him, send him down to the beach as far away from Wi-Fi as we can this weekend, and see how he does. And then we're going to do brain tap with him, because I have seen tremendous results with your product Brain Tap. And I've seen really great results with what I'm talking about with symptoms from this electronic smog. In fact, even in myself, I sent you the figures because I suffer from this, and yet my numbers are really, really good because I've been using the Brain Tap system and some of the other strategies that we use at my clinic.
Right. Well, you have a lot to share, and I know we're just about to wrap up our time, which you're just winding up, it seems.
It just started.
We could talk about, which I think there is a lot. I think we could break down into a few more radio shows, which I'm going to invite you back for, which would be great. But if somebody wants to learn more about Dr. Kort, what do you recommend is the best way that they go about learning more about you? I know you have your website for your company. Would that be the best place, or is there a better place for them to?
Well, yeah, I think, we're rebuilding our website right now, so it's okay. It's not great, but you can contact us at kortchiropractic.com. It's KORT chiropractic.com. You can also call my clinic, and our clinic number is 503-625-5444. 5678. So it's 625 Kort, Kort. And I would be happy for any of your listeners to give me a call, and we can do, say, a 15-minute consultation. And I can just talk to them over the phone about some of the concerns or some of the things that they may be seeing. Because honestly, Dr. Porter, I don't think that a lot of the medical community is seeing what's coming. And maybe because I look at things differently, we're starting to pick up on a lot of these symptoms. I want to give you just a few of the symptoms that I see with what we've talked about. I see ringing in the ears. I see anxiety, depression, stomach issues. We see blurry vision, hypersensitivity to smell, hypersensitivity driving at night. When they drive through trees, they feel very, very poorly. We're seeing a lot of flu-like symptoms that most doctors look at and they say, sounds like you're depressed. Maybe we should put you on an antidepressant. Or maybe you're high anxiety. Maybe we should put you on an anxiety medication. It's not the case. I think that their nervous systems are being driven by external sources and that we have solutions. One of the solutions is BrainTap. I think it's fantastic. I use BrainTap. Actually, I've told you this before. I listen to you last thing at night, and before I get out of bed, I usually do 2 sessions in the morning. So you're with me at morning and with me at night.
That's great. Well, one of the things I want to make sure the listeners know is that you actually have a program, because I met one of your patients that actually stopped by and at the event in Vegas, that you actually have people come out to your clinic. So even if they don't live in your neighborhood, they could come out for a week or two, right, and do some kind of extended work. I saw you do what I would consider almost a miracle with our guy there. And because we've been seeing him over 3 years. I told you that every time we come back to the area, he comes out and gets a reading on our digital pulse analysis to see how his body is improving. And we were getting slow movements over years of time. You made a quantum leap in a couple of days. So I'm going to recommend, if somebody has a case out there, especially with concussion, or you feel like, hey, you're not getting what you need with your nervous system isn't coming back online, to reach out to you, take advantage of that 15 minutes. That I didn't even realize you're going to gift that to our listeners. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. Dr. Porter, it's been a blessing and a curse, but we get people better faster than I've ever gotten people better before. We get people better in days. And so we have a program that we call an intensive, and it's one of those programs where I see somebody. I work 4 days a week, but for some intensive, we'll actually do 5 days a week, and I will see them 3 times a day. They're with me for 3 hours every day, myself, or if I have an assistant with me, and it is intense, but people get better very, very quickly. We work with all kinds of different cases. I've had some stroke cases. I've had some pretty amazing Parkinson's cases. We have several concussion cases. As you mentioned, that lady that came out, she's a professional ski instructor from Utah, and she was planning to go on a trip to Austria. And she decided, you know what, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to come out and see Dr. Kort for a week. And she did her trip to Austria. She had a fantastic time. And then she turned around and went to Disney World. And, that's speaking volumes about how well she recovered. We've had people come in from Bogota, Colombia, from California, from Florida, from Colorado. I have somebody that has been interested in coming out from Africa. So, and then Vancouver, I have lots of people come down from Vancouver, BC, and also from Vancouver, or from the northern part of Washington. And then I just had a whole family come down with concussions from Idaho. So people travel to come and get care. And I like to do an analysis first, just talk to them on the phone and see whether or not they're a good fit. I don't want somebody to come all the way to Oregon if they're not a good fit, if we don't think we can help them.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
That's a free of charge.
Mm-hmm. And I also know that we've spoke about maybe putting together some protocols and some trainings for our doctors, because obviously we work with concussions, but I don't have the expertise you do. So I'm seeking people like yourself that are knowledgeable, that can train the doctors, and we've spoke about that. So those doctors out there listening going, hey, I'd like to learn how to do what Dr. Kort does. We're going to be putting those trainings together, and we're just finalizing some of those plans, and maybe having you at some of our regional events where they can come out and spend a day and learn some of these techniques and learn about the technology that's making a difference in the lives of your patients.
I would be honored to do that. I would be so excited to do that. And, the protocols that we use, these are things that I've done over the last 3 years that have really transcended the practice. And I think that what I want to do, you don't have to be a functional neurologist. I'm not a functional neurologist. I'm board eligible. What you have to do is be able to observe and be able to look and think outside the box. A lot of people who know me go, "You're not even in the box, dude. You're like looking at the box." And that's the way I operate. Is I put together a big mesh. Like when I give a report of findings, I start with their name in the middle of a whiteboard, and by the time we're done, the entire whiteboard is full from what's going on with them and how we're going to fix it. And then that's our map. And that's what we do for the next week or 2 weeks. But I very rarely see people more than, say 30 days. They just get better really quickly. And that's good, because that allows us to do what we are supposed to do, which is be healers.
That's great. Again, thank you for being on the show, and we're going to have you back for sure, because we have a lot more. And I know we mentioned about 5 other stories that we didn't have time for today that we want to get in here. And I think our listeners need to know that there are techniques and processes out there and discoveries that can help people with traumatic brain injury or this electronic smog that we're all exposed to. And I look forward to sharing that with you. So again, thank you for being a guest on the show today.
It's my pleasure, Dr. Porter. And I really look forward to talking about the electronic smog thing, because we didn't get a chance to talk about the tests that we're doing. We're just starting them, and it's kind of a teaser. But if you can imagine being able to actually test for the DNA breaks, the mutations in the DNA through exome sequencing. That's a big word, because for looking at all the proteins of the DNA associated with these types of damage due to electronic smog. And then also we're starting to measure the voice. And the voice, we will be able to measure the voice and determine whether or not you're hypersensitive to your electronics. It is amazing.
I know our listeners got a chance to listen to and learn about canary speech, and I know there's a new app coming out. So that's a breakthrough. I mean, I have it on my phone right now because it's something that's simple and easy, and let's get it out there for the rest of our listeners. And I know that in future podcasts we're going to be talking more and more about that. So thanks for bringing.
We have some amazing things coming there. So I really appreciate your time, Dr. Porter. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm happy to do it anytime. Have a great day and be well.
Okay, you too. Take care. Bye.
This show has been produced by Market Domination, LLC. To discover how you can have your own show completely done for you and turn it into a real published book and become the authority in your marketplace, go to www.marketdominationllc.com/podcast offer.